Going back and doing something I had hoped I would have had time to do last summer, but never got around to do it, was checking the valves on the harvester. The forwarder was checked during the engine disassembly, or checking everything on that one, and but I guess apparently it doesn't sound very common that you need to adjust the valves on these engines, but so I guess it's not been done very recently at all, and needed to do a couple of small adjustments on the other machine. Started by stripping away some of the piping for the intake and air filter, and to have better access, because it's quite limited. Put some covers on the intake, a little piece of rag and a plastic piece and a zip tie, because I want to clean things up a little before going any further. And here some of the clamps and also holding the stuff here seems to be for some reason imperial measurements, so they are not metric, but maybe some metric tool could be used. But I have some of the sockets and tools in imperial stupid numbers also, so and then the pretty hefty arm holding the air filter. There is also a spacer you have to keep track on behind it, where it bolts to the engine block. Covered up both the upper and the lower connections to the intercooler also. And before cleaning up, I finally got around to doing something I've meant to do for a long time, was draining the moisture out of the compressor. Had to go up there with a string to get the water to start coming out. A little bit of rust had formed, but it wasn't too bad. I thought it would be worse. Then compressed air and vacuum and spraying away, trying to get as much loose stuff away from the top of the engine as possible. Then it's very simple. There is also a hose I forgot to show on the connection on the other valve cover. It's a crankcase ventilation, just held there with two zip ties. Then it was just a matter of lifting off the valve covers, and I dropped the bolt, so I was a little bit upset. And there are some kind of special washers on there with a seal under them. More on that later. So then, after turning the engine to the correct position, they are like paired 1 and 6, 2 and 5, and 3 and 4. So as the intake just barely starts moving on number 6, you should check number 1, and then 2 and 5 and 3 and 4 should have a clearance of 0.35 millimeter. And a couple of them needed adjustment, but nothing too bad. And here it's a little bit on the tight side for the exhaust, so loosening the nut and then adjusting the bolt in the back there. It's an Allen key that you can move around. It took quite a few tries. Usually it tends to be a little bit hard to get the first one where you really want it, and then you get kind of a feel for how much you need to move things. And as you tighten things up, it tends to follow back a little, so you need to loosen it a little further than you think you might need, and then as you tighten it, it kind of gets locked in the correct position. Some of them I had good leverage and could tighten it good enough by hand, but a few of them I added the hammer and tapped them. So number 1 and 2 were okay. Number 3, 5 and 6, the exhausts were a little bit on the tight side, so they were loosened up. Here for some reason on number 4 the exhaust was a a little bit loose and the intake was a little bit tight, so both needed to be adjusted a tiny bit on number 4, but nothing extreme. So back to the seals and stuff on the valve covers, I felt this kind of a cork seal on this a little bit older. The other one had kind of a silicone seal for the valve cover. So wanted to replace these cork seals. I think they did some update to the engines when they started having the common rail system. This one does not have that. So wanted to order a few new parts. So put a cover on there while waiting for parts. The small seals underneath the washer at the top were very hard, and they seem to be very badly back ordered, and the Komatsu manufacturing of the forest machine, they have shut down. They can't get parts now because of the COVID-19, the virus going on, and spare parts they are trying to keep up and running, but how long it will be back ordered he couldn't tell, so we'll see. We have looked at maybe making our own rubber gaskets to get it back together, but I'll wait a little longer for parts to put it back in together.